On today's episode of Candidly with Coffee, I have a special guest who's going to share her journey from marrying very young, having 4 kids, going through a toxic relationship. We're going to get into how she found fitness and now her passion as being an online coach. It's going to be a good one, guys. So grab your coffee and let's get into it. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Candidly with Coffee. And today we are getting candid with Vee Parish. Vee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
On Candidly with Coffee, I love to share stories of women that have been through it and have come out on the other side. And from what I hear, you have had quite a journey.
I've had quite a journey. The last 5 years have been compacted, I would say, with a lot of different things that have gone on. And that's really when I started my fitness journey. That's really when a lot of things happened for me all at the same time. But the thing that started everything was getting a divorce in 2019. For anybody who's been through a divorce, that's very, very difficult. I was in a marriage for 20 years and I had 4 kids. And so it was a huge impact on my life.
So take me back to that. You were married for 20 years.
I was married for 20 years.
So was it like a high school sweetheart?
Yes. So we started dating when I was 15 and got married when I was 17. And I was just showing someone in the gym this morning the picture of me in my wedding dress, and they were like, oh my gosh, what the heck?
You were a baby.
I was a baby. And I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, I look like a baby. So I was 17 when I got married, and then I had my first baby. I was a month away from turning 19. So
wow. And so you had 4 kids. Did you kind of have them back to back, or what are the age ranges of the kids?
Yeah, so back to back pretty much. I had 4 kids by the time I was 25 years old. So, and they're all around 2 years apart. So they're all grown up now. My oldest is 23. My youngest is 17. Wow. So yeah, So you are entering a different phase of life now, but tell me what that was like being in your 20s, being a baby with babies. Like, how did you manage 4 kids? And oh man, I don't remember those years very well. And I say that jokingly because, you're sleep deprived and you're busy and you're doing all these things. But I had always wanted a big family. I love being a mom. Like, I love my kids. They're amazing. And I had always wanted to be married and have the perfect family and have lots of kids. And, the fairy tale story that, Disney told us all the time when we were a little girl. That's what I really wanted. And that's what that's what I was working for. And so not only that, but my ex-husband and I were in ministry as well. So that's a big deal to be married that long and then get a divorce. But then when you're also in ministry, it's an even bigger deal. Right. But being in ministry, I had immersed myself in raising kids and then also ministry itself. And so from the time I was 19 until I was, 25, I was just, taking care of babies, taking care of toddlers, all that kind of thing. And I just I didn't stop, there comes a moment when I remember when my youngest was 6 years old and I was talking to my mom. I was like, Mom, like, I feel this like restlessness. Like, should I have another baby or should I any mom who knows, what those years are like where you're just like, I don't know how I did it, but I did. Right.
So that transitional time when you started to feel that way, were you around like early 30s?
I was.
I feel like there's something that happens, especially in women, right around that time, around from 29 to 30, some kind of thing changes. Did you feel that way?
I did. I felt like, it was a couple different things. Like, my kids were getting a little bit older where, I didn't feel they needed me anymore. They did, the youngest
But the baby, they weren't babies anymore.
They weren't so dependent on me where they were hanging on me all the time anymore. And I felt like that absence, I was like, oh, like, I kind of miss it, but I kind of like it if it's a nice little breath of fresh air. Yeah. But what do I do with myself now? And I remember having the feeling of like, not being able to hide behind my kids anymore. Like, I don't know if you, like, I realized like there were so many times when I was in conversation with someone and I would have a kid on my hip like all the time for like years, for over 10 years, you know, I'd have a kid on my hip. And so whenever you're engaged in conversation, you always like, they always talk to the kid on your hip, you know?
Right.
And so, and I didn't have that anymore. I'm like, oh, I have to engage in adult conversation, like without pointing to my kid.
So you were Vee the mom, but you were looking for like Vee, Vee on her own.
I was. And being in a relationship so young from the time I was 15. And then by the time I got into my 30s, I was like, I don't even know who I am.
Right.
So
yeah,
it was.
So how's the marriage throughout all of that? That's a lot on a marriage, especially you're young and you're still maturing and changing a lot through your 20s. So how's that dynamic?
Yeah. So at that point, I mean, being so young and in a relationship, we had the typical toxic behaviors of, you know, a boyfriend and girlfriend, like very dramatic and we didn't do conflict well, you know, and we never ended up being able to do conflict well. And so that carried throughout like our whole marriage. And that was one of the hardest parts. It's one of the parts that I still regret because, you know, our kids remember, you know, certain conflicts that we had and that definitely had affected them, still probably affects them, you know. Yeah. So, and then the stresses of working in ministry, the stresses of having 4 kids, the stresses of finances, like all of that, you know, was really taking a toll on both of us.
So tell me about like your 30s. So now the kids are getting older, and then now what was in store for you at that time? Were you a working mom?
So I wasn't working. I was, but I wasn't. So because my husband was in ministry, that I don't know if, you know, for any of your listeners that are familiar with being in ministry, oftentimes by default, the wife is also in ministry, which to be honest was fine with me. I actually wanted that. I wanted to be a part of that. And so the only problem was like, you don't get compensated for it. So you don't, I mean, not in a real way.
Right.
And so I was immersed in church and my husband and my kids, like, and that was really my entire world. So it was this tiny little bubble.
So what changed from, you know, that the princess life that you wanted and were trying to create? When did you realize you didn't really have that?
Well, that princess life, when, you know, the Prince Charming isn't acting like Prince Charming.
Right.
And your kids are growing up and they're, you know, doing their own thing. And you don't feel that sense of like, man, like I've poured everything into my husband. I've poured everything into my kids. I've poured everything into this church. And I don't feel any sort of like anything back from it. And you end up feeling like, man, like, and then I just realized, you know, we talked about that sense of identity where it's like in your early 30s, like who am I?
Yeah.
And at this point in time, like my ex-husband and I, we were going through marriage counseling. We had, you know, been seeing a counselor for a while. And I remember talking to her one day and she said, well, what do you like doing? And I said, I like helping people. And she's like, what else? Like,
that's a very Disney princess answer.
Right. I know. I was like, I actually have no idea how to answer that beyond that question.
Right.
And it bothered me. I'm like, why don't I? Because of the way that I grew up wasn't really that way. Like I grew up in a family with 5 sisters. So there are 6 girls. My mom and dad raised us to be pretty independent. You know, we grew up in South Dakota and shot guns and, you know, drove stick shift and, you know, like we did all kinds of stuff like that. And so I was annoyed with myself that I couldn't answer the question beyond, I just like helping people, you know?
Wow.
And so it kind of led me on this like path of like, all right, well, what do I even like anymore? Because I had put myself on the back burner. And I see this with a lot of women.
I was just going to say that. I'm sure that many people listening right now can resonate with this 1,000%.
Yeah. But I had put myself on the back burner for so long that I realized I didn't even know what I liked anymore. Like we would go to a restaurant and I would just order what was cheapest or what, what.
It's the burnt toast. That's what I call it. It's the moms always get the burnt piece of toast, right? And it's self-inflicted. A lot of times we just kind of just end up doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a natural thing. And then being in the environment that I was in with the relationship with my ex-husband, and then also being in the church, I think like you kind of are expected to sacrifice even more than so. And I really felt that way. And so, yeah, so I just went on this journey of like self-discovery. I started journaling. I mean, I'd been journaling from the time I was 16 years old, but I started journaling about like, what do I even like? And what, if I could do anything, what would I want to do? And I had actually dropped out of high school to get married to my husband.
Oh, wow.
And I had always felt really terrible about that. And so one of the things that I decided I wanted to do was, I did get my GED, so that was done already, but I decided I wanted to go to college. And so I decided to enroll in some college classes.
Was your husband at the time supportive of this venture? Of self-discovery and all of that? Or?
Yeah. Because we were in marriage counseling, he had to be.
Gotcha.
But wasn't thrilled about it at all. And I remember telling him how I wanted to go to college. And the first thing pretty much that he said was like, "Are you leaving me?" And that was like, I was like, "No, what are you talking about?" Like I just want to do something that I want to do. And so it did for sure cause some friction. But I had to. I felt my soul just dying because I was just living for other people. I was living vicariously through everyone else instead of living authentically. Like I was just a shell of a person at this point, and I knew I needed to do something.
Right. I think it's a pretty common thing for people who get married so young to kind of go through that transition point. I mean, and some people can make it through it and some people don't, but you are just not the same person that you were in your 20s, in your 30s, and especially moms and having the young kids. And I can resonate so much with the fact that like when someone asks you, what do you like to do? And you don't even know. I remember having that same feeling at one point, like I don't even have a hobby. I don't even know what I would like to do.
Right.
So that's so good that you started to journal and things like that. Now, did you come to a realization of what you did like to do?
I did. So I mean, it was, that's the funny thing is like, people try to figure out their whole life in like, one journal setting.
Right.
And I didn't really do that. I was just like, okay, I know I want to go to college. And I think I might want to major in anthropology was the major that I had at first thought that I probably would do. And then I started taking college classes and I took one psychology class and I was like, oh, I love this. This is what I want to do. So I think there's something about just exploring your curiosities, taking one step at a time and seeing where it leads. And then, I started to, progress through school and I got tired of sitting all day. And I was just like, well, when I had to choose my classes for the next semester, I was like, oh, I need, just some like easy credits, so I'll take this PE class. I had never worked out before in my entire life.
Wow. And so how old are you at this point?
I believe I was like 36.
Wow.
I mean, I say I'd never worked out. I mean, not with weight. I'd never been in a gym. I'd never worked out in a weight room. I played softball as a teenager and like some sports in middle school and stuff, but nothing.
So this was your first kind of like foray into fitness at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was me too in my 30s.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I know. And I felt like I was just like, why did I wait so long?
Yeah, because you probably had like those natural endorphins that exercise creates that you just don't even realize until you've experienced it. It's almost like it's like a natural high.
It was. And it was this whole shift in identity for me. That was a big shift in identity for me because growing up with 5 sisters, you know, in a family, you each sort of take your spot, you know, and I was not the athlete girl. Like I was the choir girl, I was the band nerd, I was the smart one, but I wasn't the athlete. Like I had other sisters that were like really fast and they were in track or they were great at basketball. Or
Where are you in the like age range of the sisters?
I am 3 of 6, so I'm smack dab in the middle.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. But we're kind of all spaced out in 2s. So there's the older 2, the middle 2, and the younger
funny.
2 are twins. So, but at the age of 36, I take this college PE class, which was just a simple, workout class, but the instructor was amazing. And I remember one day just chatting it up with her after class, and she said something to me like, I can't remember exactly what she said, but she called me an athlete. And that was so impactful to me. I was like, what? Me?
Wow.
I'm an athlete, because for my whole life, I never saw myself as an athlete.
Right.
So it felt really good to just all of a sudden like, oh, wait, like maybe I'm more than I thought it was.
Right.
That was a big moment for me.
Yeah. And how did your kids take to this like new version of mom kind of focusing on herself? Was it a positive impact on them?
It was. They were, it was mixed for sure.
Right.
Like, there's always like a little bit of like, mom, like I need,
Yeah.
But for the most part, I would say it was positive. And I guess I mean, there's other parts to the story. I was also homeschooling them for a good long time before I had gone into college. So there was a big shift for them too, because they had entered public school for the first time when this happened. So, but they were, I would say for the most, and if you asked them now, they'd be like, well, I'm so glad you put us in public school, Mom.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. But for the most part, they were like, okay, like mom's getting it.
Yeah. That was a big power move for you.
It was.
To go like, hey, I'm putting the kids in school and I'm going to take some classes. I mean, that was like, you were really making a move there.
I was making moves. Like I didn't really think about it as being a big power move at the time. Like I literally thought like, I just need to be sane, like to be okay.
Yeah.
But looking back, I'm like, oh, those were big moves.
That's a big move.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
the
sure.
Homeschooling, switching from homeschooling to public school, that one was a hard decision for me, actually.
Yeah. Kind of some guilt maybe.
Oh, huge guilt. Huge guilt.
Yeah.
Big time.
But probably best for you and them.
It was. And it really was, to be honest with you, was actually independent of me going back to school, because I was to the point where I had a freshman in high school, 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a 3rd grader. I couldn't keep up. I wasn't able to, I didn't have the capacity to be able to teach them in a way that they all needed, especially because I had one especially that was more difficult and had a harder time, had some learning differences. And I was just like, I can't do this justice, and I need help.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine. Okay. So you discover you're an athlete now. You discover your love of fitness is starting to blossom. Like, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, where do you go from there?
So from there, I was still going to school. I was still, working on my psychology degree. At this point in time, I'm thinking like, oh, maybe I'll do something with like business psychology. And I had been in pastoral ministry for so long that I knew I probably didn't want to do like therapy.
Right.
I know the heaviness that can come with. So I was like, I'm good off that. But like maybe with like business psychology and helping to, in an HR department or, something like that. Or I was kind of just exploring with that. And then I ended up through a series, I'm skipping over some parts here, but I'll spare some of the unnecessary details. I ended up joining a gym, and I ended up joining my ex-husband at the time was at the spa gym, which I had purchased for him for Christmas, but I didn't have a gym membership. Well, I saw this gym in our same town where I could get a cheap membership for $25 a month. So here's me eating the burnt toast again.
Of course.
Or, burnt toast.
He's at the spa membership. And,
And I decided to go to this gym. It was just a regular gym. It's actually the same gym that I work at right now.
Wow.
Yeah. So Saint Fit, that was the first real gym I had ever stepped into, because up until this point, I was just taking fitness classes at the junior college, which is just in an empty room. And we're using like little, cute little blue dumbbells and everything like that. Right. But I was just like, well, I want to keep this going. And I know that there's more to learn. Like, I was just on this whole path of growth, and I was really loving it because it was.
How did your husband at the time feel about you going to the gym? Was he okay with that?
He was great with it at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, he was great with it at the time because he was super happy with his spa gym membership. And the eucalyptus steam showers that it came with. So he was good. And he's like, oh, like you can go there. That's cool. It's $25 a month. That's great.
All right. So tell me about your experience there.
So, when I first started going there, I, had no idea what I was doing. I was just like every woman, like, I don't know, for those of you who are, brand new to the gym and walking in, like I had just decided like, I'm going to be okay with looking stupid. Mm-hmm. And that was the best decision that I think I could have made.
Good for you.
Yeah. Cause like at first, the first few times I remember kind of waiting until the gym was really quiet and then kind of like checking out some of the equipment in the weight room. And then as soon as people would come, I would like scurry upstairs to the studio and do some thing on the floor with
How many years ago is this now?
This was 2018. So,
okay, so it's
about 6 years ago.
6 years ago. Mm-hmm. Did you go straight to the cardio machines? Because that's what I did.
Yeah.
I just was cardio bunny.
Yeah. I mean, any machine that I could figure out how to turn on and off and figure out that this is probably how you do it. That's what I did. Otherwise, I had no clue. And I remember one day the gym was pretty quiet, and I had purchased like an app for like $20 a month where it led you through different exercises. And so I was just like, okay, I'm going to go try this today in the weight room. And I ended up stealing someone's barbell accidentally, not knowing gym etiquette, didn't realize he was using it. But it turned out he was actually one of the trainers at the gym and super, super nice. And he ended up showing me how to actually do the exercise the right way.
Wow.
And so from there, I actually purchased some personal training sessions from the gym, which I tell people, I'm like, that is the best investment I have ever made in my whole life. That changed my life right there. And it was the most money I had ever spent on myself. I used college scholarship money to pay for a package of personal training
sessions. Because at this time, you're not actually working, earning an income, right?
I mean, I was working at the church. So I was an associate pastor as well, and I led the worship band. But I believe I was making about $400 a month.
Okay, so minimal income. So this was a big investment. To invest in yourself at this point in your life was a huge decision.
It was huge. It was huge. And I, if, from hearing my story, you probably can tell, like, I never would spend money on myself.
Right.
I was telling somebody the other day, I'm like, I bought my wedding dress at Goodwill.
Wow, yeah.
I didn't spend money on myself. Mm-hmm. So at this point where, when I found out how much the personal training package would cost, I was like, that's never going to happen, Mm-hmm. And then I remember talking to Mike, the owner of the gym, and he was just like, I think, if you can figure out a way, you should do it. Like, it'd be great for you. And I was like, I really want to, but I have no idea how. And I knew I couldn't ask for the money from my husband at the time. And so I went home. And I remembered, I still have that check I haven't cashed for that scholarship. Wow. And I took that money and I put it right into that personal training package. So,
and it was the best money that you spent, right?
The best money. I mean, I already had a little bit of a fire in me, but it poured gasoline on that fire.
I love that. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. Why did it pour gasoline? Like, describe what happened and what that process was like.
Yeah. So I think what happened was, I had spent so long feeling, living vicariously through other people, feeling disempowered, feeling like, man, like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want to do. you fall victim. Like I didn't realize how much of a victim I felt like, but I definitely felt like a victim. And so when I started to, I remember the first time I was shown how to deadlift, and I was just like, why do I love this so much? Why do I love picking up this barbell and picking it up and putting it back down? Like, why does this make me feel like such a badass right now? But I love it. I can't wait to come back tomorrow and do this.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I think it was because it was for me.
Yeah.
When you work out, when you exercise, it's just you and your body. And I mean, you don't even have to have equipment, but it's just you.
Yeah.
And it was for the first time in a very long time, I felt present. Like I felt like with myself, I felt my body, you know, I was just like, this feels great. Like I love this, and I cannot wait to do it again tomorrow. I can't wait to see how much weight I can lift tomorrow. You found your
passion.
I did.
And how did that, now, because obviously you shared that you ended up divorced. How did this transition into that? Because now probably a few years later, or like what happened there?
Yeah. So, I mean, we had been going to marriage counseling from 2013 on. And so we had been going through like about 6 years of marriage counseling at this point. And there were just some repeated patterns that kept happening, especially in conflict. There was a lot of control, whenever we would get in conflict, there would be a lot of, you know, like, not to get into too many details of it, but you know, there was some verbal abuse, there was some emotional abuse, and there was some spiritual abuse too, because, you know, when you are a pastor's wife, you're supposed to be a certain way and be submissive. And so I would have Bible verses thrown at me, and I would have all these things said to me. And then not only that, if we were in conflict, if we were in a disagreement, then, you know, like, he would take away my car keys, he would take away my wallet, just different things like that for no, like, I wasn't the one to go off and
right. Well, he was more of in a position of power and was exercising that power.
Which is also why I think why exercising felt so good.
Right. Right. Because it gave you the opportunity to have the power, literal power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was, I think, one of the other reasons. So at this point, you know, not too much longer after I had joined the gym, there was some major feelings of jealousy with him, because I found a passion. I found something that I loved, and we were still working through some of that with the counselor, but it got to be a lot, and the conflict didn't improve either. And so I remember one day in January where there was just some patterns that kept happening over and over and over again that had been happening the entire duration of the marriage. And I remember hearing, "I'm sorry" again. And I realized at this one "I'm sorry" that I've heard this "I'm sorry" so many times. It was like
a rage, regret type of pattern.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so I was just like, I don't think this is ever going to change. Like I can't see the end to this. Like we've been around this block so many times for 20 years, and I don't see this changing.
Right.
So at this point, you know, I'm just like, I'm at a crossroads where I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I can't keep doing this. I do know that. And, you know, I had going through, you know, by this time I'm like 30, 37 or so. And, you know, I've been in pastoral counseling for a good while. I've got my psychology degree almost done.
Wow.
And I'm just like, I need to set boundaries. I need to do all these things that they talk about, but when you're actually in it, it's really, really hard to do. It is hard. And to realize, like, I can't control the other person's behavior. I can only make choices that I'm going to do. So I realize I'm at this crossroads, and I had this thought, okay, Virginia, what if nothing changes? can you be okay with that? Like, what if this pattern keeps happening over and over and over again for the rest of your life, and you stay married forever and nothing ever changes? Can you envision your life, what that would be like? And then I thought about it, and I was just like, I don't know if I can do that. I really don't know if I can do that. And all I could see down that path was, honestly, I pictured myself a zombie, because you'd have to numb yourself and on antidepressants. Like, I don't like nothing wrong with that, but I knew I was headed down a path of just having to numb myself in some sort of way in order to just stay. And then I saw it down this other road where it's like, or you can choose your own path, and which one is it going to be? And at that point in time, I wasn't sure which one I was going to do, but it was the first time I had ever had that thought.
Right. What stopped you, do you think? Because to me, from the outside, it almost seems like for someone not in it, well, that's a no-brainer. If you know things are not going to change. But what stopped you from just making that decision at that point? Like, what were you holding on for? You were still holding on for change, you think?
At that point, I don't know that
the kids?
It was a couple different things. It was for the kids. It was also, practically speaking, it was financial. Yeah. That was a big piece of it. Yeah. It was also, I never wanted that for my life. I wanted the picket fence.
The fairy tale.
I wanted the fairy tale.
Princess life. Yeah.
And I was just like, what? I don't want to, I don't want to have to do this all over again. And what, the what ifs that come with that, I wasn't. So
it's a sense of, did you feel a little bit of a sense of like it would be a failure? Like that you would be failing that perfect life that you had set up? Because I'm sure from the outside looking in, you guys looked probably like this perfect family, 4 kids, mom and dad in the ministry,
Yeah. I didn't really have that feeling. That's where my South Dakota upbringing, I think, actually helped me. And man, the way that I grew up, so and it's going to seem like a departure from the topic that we're taking, but just to kind of give you a little insight, I grew up in a family where we grew up in the middle of nowhere, total redneck, not just, y'all are probably like, well, the Midwest is redneck, but we were like the redneck of the rednecks. We were like really, really redneck. Yeah. No, running water in the bathroom. Oh, wow. Like my dad smoked weed and that's all he did. And then my mom worked in a factory, and we were and then when my dad did work, it was at, he was the bouncer at a strip club in a town of 100 people.
Oh my goodness.
So I wasn't, I was well acquainted with being maybe the outcast, or I don't know about the outcast.
Gotcha. So that you weren't worried about optics necessarily if you did choose the decision of the path of breaking up the family.
Yeah, no, I wasn't really worried about that. I was worried about my kids. I was worried about how the heck am I going to make it, because I literally had poured everything into my kids and ministry at this point. And when you get a divorce, you lose your position in ministry too. Right. So I knew if I pulled the rug out from under that, I was losing a lot more than, and we also were living in a house that belonged to the church as well. So in one fell swoop, I knew that I was going to uproot multiple things, not just a marriage.
So you were at that crossroads. You were thinking, if nothing changes, can I stay in this position? Yeah. And that's kind of like where you're at. So at some point, what made the change? Because you ended up divorcing. So what was the moment that caused that to? So
a couple months after I had this eureka moment where I'm just like, nothing's going to change, I was still working out. I was still going to school. And I had just finished my workout at St. Fit. And I was talking to Mike, the gym owner, one day. And he was like, hey, he's like, long shot, but I'm looking for somebody for the front desk here. He's like, you wouldn't be interested, would you? And I was just like, there was another light bulb moment. And I was just like, actually, I might be. Because at this point, I'm making $400 a month
Right.
from working at the church.
So at this point, had you never thought about maybe trying to get a job?
I had thought about it, but I didn't know how it was going to be feasible with going to school and still doing everything that I was doing.
Right.
But I was just like, well, this would be like an easy kind of like transition.
Right.
And so, I started working at the gym as the front desk, one of the front desk people. It was the first job I had outside of ministry since I was like 16 years old.
Yeah.
I was just doing front desk work. It wasn't anything big, but the thought in my head was, maybe I can save up enough between now and when I graduate, because I was probably about 4 months away from graduating with my associates in psychology. Maybe I can save up enough to get a deposit on my own place. Was
wow.
what I was thinking. And so that's why I said yes right there.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the thing that allowed, nobody knows this besides me either.
Right.
I'm still working in the church. I'm still I haven't told a soul about this.
So this
yet.
is all stuff you are processing internally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I hadn't even told the therapist either yet.
Were you in individual therapy as well as couples?
We were in couples, and then we would also see the same person individually at times too.
Mm-hmm.
So
you were like constructing a plan a little bit, or at least something an exit strategy.
Yeah, and I had to. I mean, I know sometimes that's kind of like I don't know. Some people have things to say about that, the way that women do that, but it was honestly like I had no choice.
You had no choice.
I live here in California. All of my family's in South Dakota. It's not even I couldn't figure out how to utilize my family in order, because sometimes when you live close, you can be like, well, I'm going to go stay with my mom and I'm taking the kids with me. I didn't have that luxury.
I'm sure so many women are in that position. That's why this generation, I feel like, I don't know if you have daughters, but now you tell your daughters, always be able to support yourself, always be in a position where you're not financially dependent on your spouse. Together, you can come together and have a great life, but you should definitely be able to support yourself so that you could leave if you needed to.
Right.
Because then you get in those types of positions like you were in, and you end up staying in something that you wouldn't have necessarily if you had more of a leg to stand on.
Right.
That's just tough.
Yeah. And that was a value system that I didn't really have being in the church, because you kind of have this idea divorce isn't even an option.
Exactly.
So you don't even you throw caution to the wind. You're like, nope, we're gonna have joint checking, we're gonna have joint everything's together, and and we're never gonna get it. I had that thought. I never thought I would be sitting here at 42 years old talking to somebody about how I went through a divorce.
Yeah.
I'd never had that thought.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you get the job. Mm-hmm. How does the husband feel about the job?
Not happy. Not excited. But, at this point, there was in that eureka moment, I think he did sense a shift with me where I was fed up.
I'm sure.
I was done.
I'm sure there was a lot, just even in the energy, the way you moved, the way you spoke, the way you handled things, because those kind of things just, you cannot hide.
No.
So I'm sure it was pretty apparent.
Yeah. And in that moment, a few years back when I had gone to college, that wasn't the energy. It was just
right.
It was just me.
But it shifted.
Yeah. But that moment where I was just like, this isn't going to change, there was definitely an energy shift there. And so I think by the time that I did start working at the gym, he probably sensed this doesn't look good. This doesn't feel good.
Right.
And it was, it wasn't actually too much longer after that we got separated, and that was kind of the beginning of the end for everything.
Mm-hmm. So how was that process? Was it a mess, or was it peaceful, or was,
No, it was a big old mess. It was messier than I thought it was going to be, to be honest with you. Yeah. I mean, I've never really talked publicly about a lot of the things that had gone on, but it was very messy. It was very toxic. There were I was being, and I didn't know this at the time, but I was being spied on. I had listening devices put in my car and in my bedroom when we were separated. There were security cameras that I didn't even know about because I was still living in the church parsonage at the time.
Oh no.
And my car settings, I didn't even know that you could do this, but there was a curfew put on my car. So if you went on a GPS radius outside of a certain, so I was being monitored, and that actually enraged me even more. So it was kind of like once I realized that was going on, that was definitely the point of like, no, there is no return now. Like the separation was kind of like, I don't think this is working out. Yeah. I'm pretty sure like this is the beginning of the end. But then when I found out that those things were going on, I was like,
that pretty soon into the separation?
It was just,
that was like the nail in the coffin.
That was the nail in the coffin. I was just like, this is it right here.
That's a little crazy.
It was
That's
crazy.
Like Dateline stuff a little bit.
I know. It felt like Dateline, to be honest with you. But the thing that breaks my heart, and still to this day about the whole thing, is like my kids knew more than I wish they would have.
Oh, shoot.
And
they're a little older at this time, right? How old's the youngest at this time?
The youngest was like 11 or 12.
Okay, that's a tough age.
Still
that's
young.
Tough,
it was actually tough. And that period of time, like I didn't realize how crazy it was going to be. I didn't realize how toxic the whole separation, divorce thing was going to be. I hadn't anticipated that. I had anticipated sadness and heartbreak and maybe a little, like a normal amount of drama.
Right.
I didn't anticipate the amount of drama that we did get, though.
It just goes to show what the amount of toxicity you were probably in that you didn't realize, because that didn't come out of nowhere. No. That toxicity was living. It was there. And then it just kind of blew up.
Yeah. And everyone for the first time really saw it. And so, because for 20 years being in ministry, I had protected all of that. I had kept everything quiet. I wasn't somebody to go, I didn't even tell my mom really what was going on in our marriage. So I did a lot of protecting the appearance, Right. And so when that whole thing busted loose, I was just like, I hated it. I didn't want to talk about it, but I was just like, it's all in the open now.
Yeah. Did you feel that because you hadn't shared, it's almost like you had to play catch up with people? Like, no, it's been bad. You guys just don't know, because people go, no, you guys have the best family.
For sure.
Did you feel that a little bit?
Oh my gosh. And there was that, and that was hard because, to not say anything for so long and then to like be like, actually, it's been terrible.
Exactly. Yes.
Feels like a whiplash, which I totally understand. But then something that was going on because there was trying to keeping up of appearances, the other side of things was going around to strategic places telling their side of the story first. Yeah. And so I was even more on my back foot, and I was used to being quieter. I wasn't used to having to put myself out there to tell my side of the story, to like put on appearances. I was used to being the support. I was used to not having to tell my story. Right. And so all of a sudden I've lost all of my friends pretty much. I have lost my husband. I have lost my home. I've lost the only job that I've really ever known. And all I have is the gym. All I have at this point is the gym and working out and
deadlifts.
This is why I can deadlift what I can deadlift.
I've seen you're very powerful, but probably in more ways than one.
Yeah. But I mean, I thank God for that. Like I literally thank God for that, because if I didn't have that, I really don't know what I would have done. It really helped me to process a lot of pain. A lot of pain. Did you kind of go on that defensive campaign a little bit to share your side, or did you just think, you know what, it is what it is? If people believe it, they believe it, and it'll all come out eventually? Or like, what stance did you take? Because I think people sometimes go one way or the other. Right. What I did, I actually didn't go around and shake hands and kiss babies. Yeah. Like I couldn't even find it in myself to do that. I let people fill in the blanks. If they wanted to come talk to me, I was happy to talk to them, but most people didn't. But what I did do was I started to share not what happened, but I started to share who I was on my social media. And that helped a lot too.
That was therapeutic, I bet.
That was therapeutic, yeah. Because I kept hearing things about me through other people, right? You hear like, oh, this, and the other thing, you know?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they filled in the blanks.
Oh, so many blanks were filled in. And like, you know, like most of it wasn't true. Some of it had like, you know, threads of truth. Some of it had,
of course.
You know.
Of course, like they give them a telephone and gossip.
For sure. And I mean, we're in a small town, local, like family who's lived there for a long time. Pastor's wife leaves her husband, like has been working out now. And so like, what does that look like? Why would she leave? You know, like all these kinds of stories. And so I still had no desire to tell people like what had actually happened.
Right.
Good or bad, but I did start to share from like a very identity-based perspective, like, no, this is who I am, and let people start piecing my side of the story together on their own. Like I never came out directly, and like this is the most
fantastic
directive I've
approach.
ever been.
I think that is such a good approach because you just kind of were vulnerable on social media and showed your true, authentic self. And the people that mattered, the message would resonate with. They'd maybe look at it a little different. Like, wait a minute.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. I think there's been a lot of wait a minute moments for people where they're, and sometimes it happened later because, you know, there's been people in my life that knew me when I was a married pastor's wife, and, you know, quiet when, you know, everything hit the fan. You know, years later, you know, they're going through something similar and they're like, hey, I wanted to reach out to you because I remember. And so it's been like, man, out of all the things that I've been through, I'm just like, well, at least there's some redemption that I can help other people go through it with some grace, with some, you know, empowerment through the whole thing. For
sure. Because that's what we can do, right? When we go through those painful moments, you know, I've heard this message many times now, even on my husband's podcast, like you turn those moments of pain into power.
Absolutely.
And that's the best way to make the best out of, you know, a negative situation is be able to harness it and use it. You can use it to help people. And it's so relatable. Yeah. So relatable. I mean, every woman in some capacity. I mean, I have clients that I talk to that this story will resonate with many of the women I talk to on a daily basis. Yeah. And I'm sure. So tell me now, take me back to the gym. Do you progress in your world of fitness besides, you know, working at the front desk? What is that?
Yeah. I mean, at first, you know, I was pretty happy as a front desk girl. You know, I felt like the gym mom, you know, like running everything. I was making sure everything's clean, you know, making sure all the trainers put
You
their
really
stuff
found a
away.
home there.
I did. And it's always been such a great community. Like the people have been so wonderful, so kind, so supportive, which was amazing because, you know, after leaving the church, which was the community that I had known, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I found it in the gym. Like I didn't expect this.
It's a different kind of church.
It's a different kind of church. Yeah. Like, and we always talk, you know, we have church we have church every Wednesday on our coaching calls now. But yeah, so I was pretty happy for a while as the front desk person. And then, you know, because I was really trying to make a little bit more money, and because I loved fitness and I had been watching the trainers, you know, for a good while. We actually had a female trainer that had left. And so I remember talking to Mike and I was like, hey, I think you should let me take that personal training position. I think you need a female trainer. Because we do have clients sometimes that come in and they're like, I want a trainer, but I want a female trainer.
Of course.
And so I was just like, hi. And so he was like, all right, let's do it. And I got my cert for personal training. And let's see here, that was September of 2019. And so I had just started my career, just started like finally getting clients. We were doing really, really good early 2020.
Oh no.
And, January, February, like I was like, I'm making money. Like I'm going to do this thing, which was a huge thing for me because I was told for a long time I was never going to make it.
Right. Right.
And so I was super excited. And then
2020
COVID happened.
Yeah. And the gym industry especially was hit so hard, especially like small gyms. Mm-hmm. That was tough. So how did you navigate that?
So it was really interesting. Because I had such I've always had some grit, whether it came from growing up or 20 years of a toxic marriage or however you want to look at it. Like I had some grit in me. So when 2020 happened and the pandemic shut everything down and I had just started and I was loving what I was doing, I was like, well, I'm not stopping.
Right.
There's no way you're going to stop me from working out.
You have to pivot.
I don't care who.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm not going to stop working out.
Yeah.
So all of my clients who are under my wing, and I had all these wonderful people that I was working with. A lot of them were women. Some, I had a mix, but I was just like, well, you're not going to stop working out either. You remember why you're here. Remember why you started. And so anybody that would say yes, I took them online on Zoom personal training sessions. Yeah. But it still cut my client list in half.
Yeah.
So, but what was interesting was every other trainer left. Every other trainer left and they took the unemployment check. And I decided to stay and I took about half of what I was making. And I didn't qualify for unemployment because I was still working. Right. So it actually financially didn't make sense for me to do. But I just was just like, it was like a core value breaker for me to be like, okay, well, I'll just take the check. Yeah. So man, that was the advent actually of our online coaching programs. Like,
so it was actually a good thing.
It was a great thing.
Isn't that amazing how something so negative can lead to something so positive? And I think that is in so many ways. I always like to say that when something really bad happens, stop and think, what's going to come out of this? It's going to be amazing because I know there's going to be something that we can propel this into. So enter in online coaching. So how has that been for you?
It's been amazing. It's actually been, when I was just saying earlier, I'm like, I feel like we have church every Wednesday night when we're on our coaching calls. It's really interesting because, even though there were difficult things and things I didn't really like being in ministry, there were things that I absolutely loved. And one of the things that I love is like, I really genuinely, as I told the therapist, do like helping people.
Right.
And so I just realized I can't get my identity from that. I can't be just, that's not all there is to me. Right. But I genuinely do like helping people. And so being able to have an outlet for that is just as meaningful and just as deep, because we've chosen to make it that deep and meaningful, because we have such a core value that your purpose is hidden in your trauma. And I have plenty of trauma.
Exactly.
So you got plenty of purpose. And just where I'm just like, I can, but the thing is, it's really interesting. I little caveat to that. I think just because you have trauma doesn't mean you're able to help somebody with it. You have to be able to have overcome it in some sort of way.
Absolutely.
And there's still pieces of my story that I'm still working through. So I'm not helping anybody with that piece right now. Right. That I'm like, I still have that same problem. So I'm going to have to direct you to someone else.
Exactly.
To help you with that piece.
No, that makes total sense. Yeah. So you have to have come out on the other side of it to teach someone else how to come out on the other side of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So there's people that will relate to my story, but I'm like, okay, but what I want you to do is I want you to take that and I want you to come out of it better. For me, like one of my prayers has been, God, help me to lead in the areas of my biggest disappointments. And because usually with those disappointments, we don't want to touch them. we don't want, like,
we don't want to highlight them.
I don't want to highlight. I really don't really want to talk about my divorce.
Right.
Like, I really don't. Like, I really don't want to talk about, like, some of the things that I feel most, you know, or at some point had felt ashamed about.
Right.
But I realize if I can work through them and if I can take all of the pile of fertilizer, that pile of poo, and turn it into fertilizer and turn it into something beautiful, then I actually have something meaningful to share with other people. And I can show you exactly how to do the same thing that I did.
No, exactly. And so that's where I feel like true healing occurs, when you can not only process it, but now you can harness it into helping other people and accepting it and being open about it and not being ashamed. Yep. I think that people that, you know, they go through things, but then they deal with it and they think they've dealt with it, but then they hide it because we don't want to tell anyone we ever went through that because that's shameful.
Right.
They're not on the other side of it. And they're not going to ever get on the other side of it until they're more open about it and not ashamed. You got to let go of the shame.
I agree. I think that is huge. I feel like at that moment where you decide to take that shame and bring it out into the open, bring it to the light, I think you're right. That's when the healing starts to happen.
Absolutely.
And there's so much power in vulnerability. I really think that the more you are able to just be open with things and share, I think that the more powerful you become. Right. You know, I had just shared something on my social media, like, of a body insecurity that I have. And I want to share about that? Not really.
No, but I saw that post.
Yeah.
But those are the types of things that really help other people to see that kind of stuff, especially in this day and age with social media being the highlight reel and filtered and perfect. People need to see that kind of stuff. They need to see the real stuff because it makes them feel better about what maybe they're going through. So I'm sure that your vulnerability and willingness to share, like you said, you started sharing on social media, really has helped to attract your client base. Do you help a lot of like women in the same kind of scenario?
Yeah. I mostly work with women. With working with Mike, you know, I end up working with men through him. Right. But, you know, as far as, like, direct, you know, clientele, I work with women just because I've found, like, when a huge part of what, you know, what's powerful to most people is being able to relate to you. And I can relate best to women. You know, I can talk about the burnt toast with them. I can talk about boundaries and putting yourself on the back burner and how to find your voice and how to feel powerful instead of small and how to get out of that victim mindset. You know, like, a lot of those major pieces that I think most women identify with.
Isn't it amazing that all of the things, the difficult situations in our lives, in your life over the years, all those horrible things you went through, now those are the things that you call upon to help other people. They're all like tools in your toolkit to help your clients and other women.
Absolutely. I think that God doesn't waste a good crisis on us. Like, that there's a redemptive purpose in all of the pain that we go
if the
through.
Right person has the crisis, and then they know how to harness it.
Right.
And that's the thing. And I guess part of coaching is helping other people harness their pain and their crisis to turn it into power for them.
100%. 100%. That's why I love what I do. It's, you know, for me, like, I use fitness, but to be honest with you, I feel like it's a tool. It's a tool for something much bigger than just fitness. Like, I don't even really I mean, I do put it on my page, but my story really has to do more with overcoming life's difficulties.
Absolutely.
Rather than just like, oh, this is how you deadlift.
Exactly. It's so much less about the mechanics of how you do a proper shoulder press or something like that. It's so much more with what's going on in the mind. So tell me now, like, what's going on with you now? How's life now?
Life's great. Like, life is really good. You know, everything, all of the drama has settled, you know, into the dust, thankfully. Kids are, you know, they're growing up. Like, my daughter's a junior. She's the youngest one.
Oh, wow.
So she'll graduate from high school this next year. And, you know, they're all close, like we're all still close. And that has, you know, that's turned out maybe not the fairy tale that I thought it was going to be, but it's still good, you know, and I love, so it's my life right now is my family and my job, my business. Like,
so
and
you're
I
in
love it.
So you're in a good place.
I am in a good place.
When
yeah.
Mom's in a good place, the kids will be in a good place. That's for
right.
sure. You got to take care of you, because if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of anybody else.
You can't. And I really realized that, you know, when I started my fitness journey, and I realized like, oh, I'm actually not relying on other people for my own happiness anymore.
I love that. Well, you've come a long way from walking into the little gym. Who needs eucalyptus and a spa gym? Because apparently you didn't need that.
I didn't.
All you needed was a Saint Fit. It felt like it was a real pivotal point in your life.
It was huge. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. It was such a good conversation. I love it. I know so many of my listeners are going to resonate with this conversation. So I appreciate you putting yourself out there like that and sharing and being vulnerable.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.